Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we haven't done this in a while, but we are returning back to the land of the rising sun, doing a couple Japanese beers today. I'm doing a single brewer review, and if you caught the prior Japan reviews that I did, you will recognize the label and the brewer. We are doing a review of two Hitachino Nest beers. And Hitachino Nest is the brand label that is brewed by Kyuchi Brewery, and they are based out of Ibaraki, Japan. Today we've got two I have never had yet again, so I'm really looking forward to this. The last one I had by Hitachino was their red rice ale, and it was unbelievable. So I have very high hopes for these. Today we've got a white ale. It's aptly named white ale. And we've got a Weizen that is aptly named Weizen. So they're very plain with their nomenclature for their beer names. It's just under the label, and then they name it after whatever the beer style happens to be. So in this case, a white ale and a Weizen. 5.5% ABV on the white ale, 5% ABV on the Weizen. And the white ale, I can tell you, as is typical for this style, they did put in some traditional spices, and they have it listed on the very back label, coriander, orange peel, and nutmeg. So that is really a classic white ale spicing lineup there. So I'm expecting that these are going to be kind of their Japanese takes on some traditional, really Germanic and Belgian styles. That's really where these are. So really looking forward to doing this today. And we're going to jump in, starting with the white ale. Again, this one's 5.5% ABV. Okay, so getting started with the Hitachino Nest white ale. This is 5.5% ABV, and this is the one that has kind of been flavored as a classic Belgian, really, white ale would be. It's got coriander, orange peel, and nutmeg. So I imagine it's going to be quite flavorful. And as is typical with Hitachino Nest beers, they have their little hukuro or owl, Nihongo de owl, on the label here. Seems to be on all of their packaging, and it's on the bottle cap as well. So that's pretty cool. Nonetheless, let's get this one cracked. I am very, very excited. I have had very good luck with all of their beers, so I'm really hopeful that this is going to be a really exceptional white ale. So let's get this poured right in. All right. That is beautiful. That is a classic white ale appearance. It's a very, very, very pale yellow, or a straw yellow color, as I will often term it. It does not look dissimilar in appearance to, say, a Saison. It's that very light straw yellow. It's a very pale yellow, which is also obviously due to the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot, they can't add orange peel, coriander, nutmeg, but the same thing, the German Weiss beer, white beer. That's what this is. It's white beer, only this is done in the Belgian style with the seasonings. Also, very similar to the white beers you'll get out of brewers like Unibrew, that brew Belgian style, where they will spice it, add spices. Looks great. Very, very active carbonation. It's very, very fine bubbles. And there's a little bit of the sediment from the additives in there, which gives a slightly cloudy appearance. That's very common with white ales, much like it would be for hefeweizen and other similar type beers. But let's give it a sniff. Oh, it smells lovely. You can really smell the seasonings in there. The nutmeg comes through quite strongly on the nose, which pleasantly surprises me. You can definitely smell the orange. The coriander, it's hard to pick up aroma-wise. Coriander, it's one of those tricky elements. Coriander seed is actually the seeds of the cilantro plant. You can use them interchangeably. The actual cilantro plant herb itself, common as a seasoning in Mexican and Tex-Mex cuisine. Kind of a polarizing flavor. Some people think it tastes like soap. Some people think it tastes metallic. Some people don't taste that at all. They just taste the base herb. But the seeds of that plant are what are known as coriander seeds. Just FYI, slightly confusing. But smells great, looks great. Let's jump right in. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's so bright. It's so light and it's so bright, but it's absolutely packed full of flavor. And this is kind of the thing, I know I shouldn't keep getting caught off guard by this, because every single Hitachino Nest beer that I've had has been like this. Just, wow, I can't believe how big that is, how big and full of flavor and complex. This is as good as any Belgian offering I have ever had. I mean, this is just top notch. This is an absolutely top notch white ale. No question about it. I'm going to jump in, body mouthfeel, and then explore where, how, and in what ratios this finish develops. The body's medium, 5.5%. That's about where I would expect it to fall in the range. The mouthfeel, it's nice. It's quasi creamy, but not silky creamy. It's not nitro tap stout or cream ale creamy. But when it starts rolling around the palate, you can feel that it's got a really nice, delicate texture. It's just still so actively effervescent that kind of breaks through some of that creamy texture that you would otherwise get in the palate. But it's very, very nice. The finish, the way this flavor, I'm going to have to jump back in because it is quite complex. Let me go in for one more dive. Lord knows I've got plenty in this bottle with which to work. Let's just top this off, dive in again. God, it smells so good. First thing you get it in your mouth, you're hit immediately with a very strong nutmeg. Then the orange peel, orange flavor kind of starts to come in, and you can really taste the base malts as well. You get the coriander in the back, though. It's kind of riding behind maybe 15% of the overall spice flavor profile. I'd say nutmeg's about, probably about 40%. The orange is probably about 25%, and the coriander is about 15%. Somewhere in there. My percentages could be off. I didn't, it's off the cuff, but it's not an even balance. But the balance of it is quite nice. Honestly, the orange can be very overpowering in a white beer for me, any white ale, or if they wanted to do a lager style, it doesn't matter. But the base spice white beer, orange can be overpowering. I think putting the nutmeg up front with a little heavier hand in comparison to the others is a really smart call. It gives it this really nice flavor forward without being over dominated by anything else. Nutmeg can overpower just as easily as citrus can, but the ratio they got, I think they nailed it for letting all of the flavors speak, and it just pairs so masterfully with the malt bill. You still get that classic white ale malt bill. It's one of those that's more kind of baked good, is the best way to describe it. It's not doughy, it's not yeasty, but it puts you in mind of baked goods, of breads, without tasting yeasty or doughy. It's got that grainy quality about it, and it's really nice. And it's not a multi-sweet kind of grain. It's just the raw grain kind of quality that comes through in the beer, and it pairs so well with the spices that they added. It's just so light and refreshing. This is a home run of a white ale. I'm absolutely loving this, and bully for me because I got a really large bottle here. A pint and a half, so that's a good bit of beer to get through. I'm going to take my sweet time sipping on this, count my scores. When we come back, we're going to jump over to their Weizen, and that one's 5% ABV. Okay, so jumping into beer number 2 of today's Hitachino Nest. That's Kyuchi Brewing Company. It's their Hitachino Nest label. Beer number 2, this is their Weizen. Weizen, that's the name of it as well. It's a 5% ABV, so let's get jumping right in. Ah, lovely. All right. Glugging away. I love it. All right. That one formed a bit better head, but I think it's going to dissipate, only just a tick slower than the other one. Okay, visually, this looks a little bit deeper yellow than the prior. So it looks very much like a Weizen, and indeed I can see some slight bit of cloudiness to it, though it's quite a bit clearer than your average Weizen. No question about it. So let's give this a sniff here. Again, just with the prior, though it's not quite as active, it's got really fine, small champagne-like bubbles that are rising up for the head. So it's actually holding okay. I didn't anticipate that. Let's give it a sniff. Okay, aroma-wise, it doesn't have a super pronounced aroma, and I can tell you it does not smell like a classic Weizen. I cannot smell any hint of clove on the nose, so I don't know if they brewed with hefeweizen yeast or not. It's possible that they did not. I can smell the malt bill. It smells really nice. It smells malty. Again, not sweet. It smells grainy. That's the aroma I'm getting from the malt that's coming through. Yeah, just no hint of clove at all, which is going to be interesting. So let's jump right in and see what their Weizen's about. That's a very interesting Weizen. It's got an interesting, wow, I didn't anticipate that. It's got an interesting layer of flavors. That's really good. Okay, so while I can't pick up any clove at all on the nose, there is a little bite of it up front. It's mild. It's a milder kind of clove that comes through and immediately gets out of the way. What you taste is this bright, bordering on sweet fruitiness, though I can't pinpoint the specific fruit that may be in here. Flavor-wise, there's no fruit in the beer, but that come through in the palate. I'll come back to explore that again. But behind that, you get the grain bill that comes through and is very grainy, and then just this big bloom of caramel, rich, deep caramel, kind of akin to a dulce de leche. It's rich, thick, deep caramel that comes through. Not toasted, not culinary torch. We're not talking creme brulee here. We're talking like caramels, wrapped caramels, or dulce de leche, a deep, thick, rich caramel, proper caramel. It's really interesting the way that this, okay, yeah, I can get just a hint of the clove on the nose now that the head's broken away a little bit. It's not a super pronounced aroma at all, but it does smell a bit like a classic hefeweizen. They're just calling it Weizen, which is fine. It doesn't really matter. But you do get a bit of that classic aroma, albeit not super pronounced. I'm going to jump in because there's a lot of layers here. I want to make sure I get it right. Fruit, bright fruit. Reminds me most of apricots, maybe a hint of banana, which is kind of classic for Weizen. And that's very bright. There's a slight sweetness to it. It's a slight hint of booziness to it, which is interesting for a 5% ABV. That opens immediately into that grain bill. It's a pure grain, and that lasts about another second or two, and then that opens very strongly into just flavorful caramel. It's very deep caramel, and you don't expect it looking at this beer and knowing that it's a Weizen. It's a very interesting flavor to have in here. I can't even conceive of how they got that flavor profile in this beer, but it's really quite nice. It adds a richness to a beer style that normally doesn't have it. I don't think it's out of place. It's uncharacteristic for the style, but it pairs very well with how this beer is done. It's quite well balanced. Body on this one, again, it's medium. Mouthfeel on this one is quite a bit creamier than the other one. It's not quite as active in the carbonation department, so the mouthfeel can really cream up without the carbonation just blasting it. So it really feels nice and creamy rolling around the palate. Finish on this, after all of those flavors develop and roll around and move around the palate, what you're left with on the back end is a classic hefeweizen clove. You can taste it, and it mixes with the grain, it mixes with the slight sweetness and slight fruitiness, and it mixes with the caramel. And it's almost even parts, all of them. And you can pick all of them out independently. The finish on this is quite long as well for a Weizen. It really is lingering. And the dominant flavors that I'm tasting is it's tailing off this finish, which is still going. It's clove, a little bit of grain, the caramel's out of the way, a slight bit of fruit, and that's it. That's where it ends. The clove is the dominant, the grain is only just below it, and just the hint of fruit that's just below that. That's kind of how it pans out at the very end of the finish. It's very nice. This is a very nice beer. It's very well done. It's a very interesting Weizen. It's got a lot more layers of flavor than your average Weizen, and I don't mean that as a knock on the beer. I think they've kind of taken a classic recipe, and whatever they did to tweak it to bring out these characteristics, I'm a big fan personally. I'm going to take my time and sip on this one. This one's quite complex. It's going to take me a while to come up with my scores, but I'm going to do that. When we come back, we're going to get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked. We are starting with the white ale. This one's 5.5%. Again, Hitachino Nest is a brand label by Kiyuchi Brewery, and they are based in Ibaraki, Japan. The aroma on this one, very, very nice, and certainly above average in how strongly it came through for a white ale, but not quite as prominent as many others, particularly the Belgians, but it was still a very nice aroma. I gave it an 8 out of 10. For the taste, absolutely loved it. This is equally as good as I mean, honestly, it's superior to the vast majority of white ales I've ever had, but it's equally as good as the top tier Belgian and other American craft interpretations. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body was exactly where I would expect it to be for the ABV. It was right in the range, perfect medium body. I gave that a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this one, the mouthfeel was nice, but it was a very, very active carbonation that was in this beer, so it kind of killed some of that creaminess to the edge of the mouthfeel, which otherwise would have made itself more present. It's still above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the finish, this beer had a very long finish indeed. The spices that they put in, the nutmeg, the orange peel, the coriander, the balance of them, and the way that it paired with the malt bill, all of it really extended a really nice, long, enjoyable finish. You just kept tasting all of the individual ingredients, and it just went really, really, really long. Certainly well above average for the style. I give it a 9 out of 10. Head and retention on this one. Head and retention was not great. I saw as soon as I started to pour it how active it was, effervescence. I had a sneaky suspicion that the head would probably not form, and if it did, it would disappear very quickly just due to how much veracity of carbonation activity was coming up to hit the top, and certainly I was correct. I only gave it a 2 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was a lovely white ale. It was slightly occluded, as you would expect from the addition of the spices in there. There's always going to be a little suspended material, but it looked textbook, beautiful color. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance on this one. This is one of the things that really pleasantly surprised me the most, and I really shouldn't be. It seems every time I try a beer by Hitachino Nest that I'm really blown away with how flavor forward and how well balanced it is. And this was no exception. The balance of the spices in relation to how it paired to the malt bill they selected, it was just a masterclass in how to do a white ale properly. A little more nutmeg than the orange, and the coriander, I think, really helped all of the flavors interplay far better than average, because citrus can be very, very overpowering. And the balance of the ratios that they put in of the spicing Really let all of the individual players come through without any of them drowning out the other. It was just beautifully done. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I absolutely loved it. This is easily top 3 best white ales I've ever had. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, while I did dock some points for mouthfeel and aroma and head and retention, the base beer itself and the base beer drinking experience was so exceptional that even though I teeter-tottered, I really did think that it deserves a 10 out of 10, even though I did dock some points in categories. So 10 out of 10 as an example of the style. That brings the total score on the Hitachino Nest White Ale to an 86 out of 100. So this is certainly well above average. If you're a fan of this style, I do highly recommend this one. This is very, very well done. Moving on to their hefeweizen. They call it Weizen. This one's 5% ABV. The aroma on this one was okay. It wasn't anywhere near as pronounced as on the white ale, and I really couldn't detect that much that I was going to get out of the beer. It wasn't super prominent. It wasn't low end, but low end of average. I gave it a 4. For the taste kind of turned around because I didn't know what to expect just based on the aroma. And the lack of a clove aroma, which you expect in Hefeweizen, certainly made itself present in the beer. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was definitely there, so you got that classic Hefeweizen yeast character trait that came through. I give it a 9 out of 10. The body on this, just as with the prior, it was a nice medium body, perfect in range for the ABV. It gets a 10 out of 10. Where this one deviated from the prior, certainly coming into the mouthfeel. This one was effervescent, but it wasn't over the top like the white ale was. So it actually had a very good opportunity to let that creaminess create as it rolled around the palate without the activity and veracity of the carbonation activity kind of breaking it down. So it really, as it rolled around, did have this nice, lush, creamy mouthfeel. I gave it a 10 out of 10. For the finish, yet again, this beer had a very nice, very long finish. This is well above average for a Hefeweizen. I was very, very surprised with how long that flavor just stuck with me. And it was nice and it was balanced. You could get the classic Hefeweizen yeast character traits that kept going, as well as the malt bill, and it was very, very long. I would say absolute top tier. It gets a 10 out of 10. Head and retention on this one. This actually did form a very nice head, and it retained very, very well. This was classic Hefeweizen. It easily could have been poured off of a tap. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance on this one was very nice. The color was certainly in range, but I did expect it to be a bit more hazy than it was. And I only docked 1 point, but that's the reason. Typically, there's a bit more of a haze to a Hefeweizen. This was there, but it was subtle. I gave it a 9 for the appearance. Balance on this one. I really enjoyed the balance of this beer. The malt bill really came through, and the Hefeweizen yeast characteristics did come through. But even though my personal preference is not super astringently clovey in most Hefeweizens, this one was a little tame and a little mild on that front for my money. I would have liked just a little more presence to make it known. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. I really, really enjoyed this beer. Perhaps the average Hefeweizen drinker would say it doesn't have enough clove impact. For me personally, I like it a little more balanced out with the malt, which this did well. For the style, you could say it's on the low end of intensity, but for my subjective scoring, I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. I absolutely loved it. Finally, as an example of the style, I come back to the clove quality of the Hefeweizen yeast again. It was there, but it didn't make itself present in the aroma at all, which kind of threw me for a loop before I even dived into the beer. And then when I finally got it, it was there, but it was very, very mellow. I think just comparative to other Hefeweizen style beers out there, this is a bit more on the tame end. But don't take that as it's not flavorful and a fantastic beer. It absolutely is. I think it just needed a little more clovey presence in the flavor profile, and certainly a more present aroma to kick it up that extra point. I gave it a 9 out of 10 as an example of the style. That brings the total score on the Weizen to a 90 out of 100. So all total, just a 4-point spread. Both absolutely fantastic beers. Everything I've ever tried by Hitachino Nest has been absolutely fantastic. I'm always keeping my eyes out for more. I love Japanese beer, particularly Japanese craft, and they are one of the best, in my opinion, at least that I can get with ease in the United States. So folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Likes help the channel, helps others find us. Subscribe will make sure that you can keep our videos in your feed, and if they ever stop popping up, you can just go straight to your subscriptions button and go straight to the channel to catch up on any content you might have missed. Comments are really big. I want to know your thoughts, opinions, feelings, suggestions, questions, anything you want to throw at me, throw it in the comments, and I will reply. I am taking your input to heart. Lastly, if you want to make sure you stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the little notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Till next time, folks, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.